Welcome back to Leadership Rediscovered with Laura Siebold. This episode is a continuation of last week's episode. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, we suggest you go back and listen to part 1.
And I think about where you are in your journey. I mean, I'm sure you've learned things along the way about leadership, and maybe with hindsight being a good teacher too, of like, oh, I would have done that differently had I had the knowledge that I have now. Do you have pearls of wisdom or advice for maybe someone who is stepping into more of a leadership role for the first time? Maybe they don't see themselves as leaders, but they're put in a position of leadership, and how do they rise to that occasion? I'd love to hear any advice or thoughts you have there.
I think that there's a few. One of them is not being a sole rider. I think one of the errors that I did was I'll just do it myself. So, this can't be, this is taking too long, I'll just do it myself. And there's one of my friends, I was telling him that I cannot let things die when I'm around. And then he's like, well, that's very good. And then he says, but things will die when you're not around. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was like same principle. Yes, if you're around, it will be, but if you're not around, it will die. So taking it slower, in a sense of sometimes the time that you spend over communicating with your team and sort of telling them things that you think are obvious, I think it's golden. Like, you don't see it right away. It's frustrating. It's annoying, but it's actually golden. And I think for me, what ended up happening is you burn out because you're going and you're doing everything by yourself, but you don't have to. So I think for me, the first thing is don't be it's like bulldozer. I'm just going to do it myself. It's great for the moment. Things will get done, but in the long run, it's you can't sustain that. And then other things is that, at the end of the day, like, I don't think I've ever met a leader who felt like they were doing it right. I think it's everyone is struggling. Everyone is really trying. But I think what makes a leader is almost like never stopping moving forward. So even if I'm not sure, I'll just do one, take it. And this idea that you have it all figured out, I think, especially for the younger guys, it's like, no, we're all trying to figure out. It's like, no.
And then when you reach a certain level, I mean, you're really at the bottom of a new level, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're just kind of like, okay, now I got to figure this
It's like, does it ever stop?
Out. Yeah.
Right? It's like, does it ever stop? It's like you're on one moment. I'll give you an example. I thought for us, it was once we get to a national program, that's it. I'm buying out. And then we get there and it's like, wait, now we're having issues of how do we make sure that there's equity, there's how we make sure that everyone is having a fair chance. And it's like, man, does it ever stop? And it's like, no, it will never stop. So, and you will never feel like you will know. The moment you feel like you know something, you're onto something. Like, I have no idea how to do it. For a number of years, I know how to deal with volunteers. I could get volunteers in day. We could have so many volunteers because I had figured out how do I make sure my leadership style was for that. Yeah. Then now you have full-time staff, and it's different because they can't. It's a different set of leadership, and I'm like, man, do I know how to deal with that? I will try, but it's different, and you have to be willing to grow. Yeah. You have to be willing to grow. But that's the thing. It's like learn as much as you can from whoever you can. The last thing I would say is also that especially on the learning part, is don't assume that you can only learn from people in your industry. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that leaders, whether they're pastors, whether they're government leaders in education, have all the same issues. So you can learn so much from many different people. So for me, it's like, get as much knowledge as you can from anyone and anywhere. Ask questions, and never stop asking. You never know. People are better than we think. I think people are more willing to help than we acknowledge. So ask for help.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. I agree with that. And I think sometimes people are just afraid to ask.
Yep.
But I mean, what's the worst thing someone's going to say? No.
No.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, it's a no if you don't ask.
Exactly.
So might as well try and see what
Exactly.
happens.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I think for me that has been my biggest surprise. How many people are willing to help. But you just gotta say it. You just gotta say it. And if you have a vision, people will
I was just
join.
gonna say, if you paint the vision, and I do think there's a lot of people. I would say most people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. So if you show them, hey, by being a part of this and coming along for the journey, here's the impact you can have. Then it's like,
yeah, and part of it is also that people think that. People are motivated just by money. I'm like, then you have not understood human beings. It is so weird because you can get some people who are on and what they want is this sense of meaning. They want to be part of something that they know will make a difference. Yes. And they're willing to do so. I mean, that's for me. I was able to get some of the people on our board. I wrote to every debate person that I could know, and I'm like, hey, would you? And they're like, you have some who say no, and some are just, whatever.
Not your people.
Exactly. And I was like, we'll not get along anyways. But you have some where you're surprised. And if you're willing to just, hey, I want to learn, people would help, and people would come along.
I think those are the situations where you kind of learn who your real friends are too, because there's a lot of relationships that when you're in a more vulnerable situation and you really need to count on somebody else, the people that show up for you aren't always the people, at least in my experience, they're not always the people that you think. Yeah. And then there's other people that really surprise you that wow, I didn't realize we were as close as the way you're acting. And that was a pleasant surprise.
Yes,
support.
Totally. No, totally. I think you're right on that. And a thought that just came to my mind, I'm like, isn't that interesting that I am from Rwanda, we're in West Virginia, and we're having the same experience in terms of, it is, but it shows you how, well, if you're willing to go beyond whatever the superficial things, there is a lot of good things that could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of you being in West Virginia, how do you spend your time? I'm so curious. Now that you've established this program, what are the things that you're working on? What's a day in the life like for you?
Well, I think now, I'll tell you, I always say I have issues that I'm thinking about in different seasons. Okay. One of the seasons now, what I'm thinking about is how do you build excellence? And the reason is that we are lucky to work with, thousands of kids, and many of them are talented young people. But then the question is, how do you build a culture of excellence? How do you get them? And maybe debate can be one part of it, but then how do you get them to do hard things? How do you get them to go beyond the norm? And, that's the thing I'm thinking about lately. So it means now I'm going to be watching videos about that and obsessed about that. But otherwise, I mean, now I'm traveling quite a bit, building up relationship with universities and to first of all build pipeline for our students, opportunities for our students.
Just like you had?
Yes,
same
exactly.
Kind of, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. Yeah. And then also one of the things, especially here in West Virginia, I'm at Fairmont State, and the idea of how do we build partnerships with the university and Rwanda as a country, not just iDebate, but Rwanda as a country. And it came from my relationship with Mike Davis, and we were thinking of what if we could have an overarching vision where we build a relationship when we're still at James Madison, we build a relationship between Rwanda and James Madison, and that is, starting from, student exchange, faculty exchange, truly learning from one another at different levels. So then now that's the whole idea. It was like, what if we could build a relationship between Fairmont State and Rwanda? And I think I've been here for a few days, and one of the things that is exciting is the kind of students that Fairmont State serves and that are from this region have a similar experience in Rwanda. So meaning that they're coming from poor backgrounds. Many of them do not see themselves beyond the area where they're born in. Yes. So their parents have some are first generation, and they don't see themselves beyond these few, and like very few will probably think of like even in country, not even beyond, like they don't think of themselves as people who have big dreams and aspirations. And now it's like, okay, so, and they have, and for some reason, and for really concrete reasons, they have been, vicious circle of poverty for generations.
Yes.
And that affect what people think is possible for them and what they think is possible. So then now, I think with Mike, we're thinking of, okay, how do we change that for, both of these communities?
Yes.
For Rwandan students and then, students from Fairmont, and show what is possible. So that's the exciting thing that is coming up, the new obsession that is going to be there to think of. And I think one of the thing that is exciting is then we get to build something that others can see that it's possible to build. Yeah, and that's the exciting part.
That's what I think is amazing, because I'm sitting here listening to you thinking about, are there other Jean-Michels out there in other countries saying, I want to build something like this, or I want to change the entire culture of my community, my country, my continent?
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Because, one of the things, and sometimes we stumble on things, honestly, like I'm not as smart as I would like to think, but there are things that just happen. And one of them, for example, was every year I would bring students to the U.S. They would do a tour of the U.S. And every time I asked them, what is it that, reflect what was the best experience? And they'll tell you, we went here and here. But the one thing that they've all been consistent in saying is that I saw that I can do as well as anyone else, and that I'm as important as anyone else. And for me, I think that's amazing, because then you're coming from a small country, you're from an African country with all the stereotypes that is tied to Africa, being a place of misery. Now we are in the same room having intellectual battles, and I am as articulate, as smart as anyone else in that room.
Winning. If I remember, getting back to the competitive American winning contest.
Yeah, and it's almost like, for me, that's the real magic. That magic of you are in the room and you're like, you deserve to be in the room, and you are as articulate as anyone else. And even for me, what I found is, it's not even about being right. Sometimes it's when we are equals, you can correct me and I'll correct you. There's no sort of, but that for me is what needs to happen. Now imagine West Virginia students and then Rwandan students. It is not a
lot of stereotypes too.
Exactly.
In case someone hasn't told you.
I can
a lot of stereotypes too.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think one more, and I really want to understand a lot of these things. But what I see, I've seen. Like I have seen.
We're not so different.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's like I've seen. I've gone to meetings, and then the first thing that comes is, these are the 10,000 reasons to why this can't work, and I'm thinking, I'm like, yeah, but and I'm like, but it's again that mentality of like that can't work, and I think. If you join in any of my conversations with Mike, it's like, how do we change that?
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's the exciting part, because if we're able to do it in both places, then wow, what an amazing thing.
Well, and just creating space for magic to even happen. Because if you say that's not possible, and here's why it's not going to work, you're not even allowing space for magic to happen. Honestly.
So then it means, and you're not even forcing us to think harder, because if you say, it's hard. It is hard.
Yes.
And everyone knows it's hard.
Yeah.
But if there is a possibility that it couldn't happen, then it's like, now let's think hard. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't have the answer right now, but we're going to continuously think about it and figure out how can we make it happen. And that's a different kind of mindset. And for me, I think that's what leadership is. It's like, well, right now with what we have, I'm not sure if we can, but let's figure out. Let's really think hard. Who can we talk to? And weirdly, it will happen if you are serious about it.
Yeah.
If you're serious about it.
Maybe a little obsessed.
Yeah, exactly. I always say we all need some people. Like, I think one of the things I think about is that we need people who are obsessed, and we also need people who are chilled to tell the people who are oppressed that it's not that serious. It's like,
it's true, because normally being obsessed has a very negative connotation, usually.
Yes.
And so this has been such an interesting conversation for me to think about. But honestly, a lot of times, that's what drives people to success, is because that obsession fuels a commitment of, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep trying, even if I bump up against a wall or two. So it's actually a much more positive way to think about it.
It is. When I work with entrepreneurs, I always say, if you don't think your idea is the best idea in the world, everyone else is just wrong, then I'm like, don't do it. It's like, why? Don't do it. Like, you got to have that obsession of like, there's nothing better in this world than this. And because somebody has to care a lot.
Yes.
Somebody has to care a lot.
Yeah.
And it's if the person at the top doesn't care a lot.
Well, it's so true, because it's like, what are we all fighting for?
Exactly, because it's hard. Because it's hard. So it's like, why would we do that? No, totally.
That's so true. All right, one question I was very, very curious to ask you, given your background on multiple levels, but your country, your experience with debate, is just thinking about conflict, thinking about where things are, or what it feels like things are right now with just this extreme polarization. Like, you have to be on one side or another. You're either for me or you're against me. And that's everyday conversations of conflict, political or social or whatever. But then, I mean, even more so from there, you've got very serious and tragic violence happening in the world right now too, which again, as I look at the situations, because a lot of times we're not, we being in America right now, we're not necessarily involved in some of those conflicts directly. We're not there. We're not living there. So looking at it from that perspective, you kind of sometimes can see that both sides feel very justified, and both sides feel right. And so it made me think about you, again, your background, and then even the debate background of just, if you have any perspective or advice to give people around that feeling of, I know I'm right, or someone has to pick my side, or maybe even what you were talking about earlier with, what leads to some of this violence, but just maybe a different way of thinking about approaching those conversations or those situations.
How much time do we have?
Go for it.
And the reason I'm asking is about 10 years ago, the 20th commemoration of the genocide in Rwanda, one of the projects that we started was a project called Voices from a Post-Genocide Generation. And the idea was, what if we could use Rwanda as an example of what happens when polarization goes to extremes, right? So we took students and we spoke at many universities, and I think it was easier to use Rwanda as an example and tell them this is what happens with when we allow polarization to go beyond, right? When violence starts. And one of the I always think of, like, Rwanda is a great example of what not to do, but then also what is possible, right? Because it's not that everything just went downhill, but then think of it as afterwards. What happens is a society rebuilds. The Rwandans are rebuilding their economy, rebuilding everything. And then you think, if they're able to do it, right? It's you're thinking of former, children of former perpetrators, children of survivors working together, living together. And it doesn't mean that it's perfect. It's not.
But it's a relatively short period of time when you think about it.
Exactly. And it's humans. I mean, it's going to take years and generations for people to heal. But then you think of, on both sides, what not to do and then also what to do. But one of the things that we have done is to tell people, well, be careful. The moment violence starts, then it becomes almost like an unending cycle of violence. Because I harm you, then your family is going to harm my family.
Violence begets violence.
Exactly. And it becomes justified, right? And part of the ways that, and all history shows that the more we allow for polarization to happen, because what happens with polarization is then we start having scapegoating, right? So we start saying the reason to why the world is, all these problems around the world are, is because of this person, right? Or people like these. Think of it in Germany. In Germany, well, the economy is doing badly and there's hyperinflation. And then what does he say? Well, the problem is the Jews and these people who basically are stealing our heritage, or they're doing all this harm, and if we get rid of them, then the problem is going to be solved. Let's look at the U.S. sometimes. When we talk of, some people would say, oh, there's not enough, there's a problem of unemployment. Who is to be blamed? It is the immigrants. They are taking our jobs, right? So what happens is that we have this propaganda which will be like a simple answer to a complex issue. And then we start dehumanizing the other, right? Because now, once we have already seen that it's us and them, and then it's us versus them, then we dehumanize and say, well, they're not truly human. In Germany, they used to talk about rats. In Rwanda, they used to talk about cockroaches. And these things are scums. They're less than human. And we justify anything that is done to them, right? And that's the problem, is that we start dehumanizing and pluralization happens. Now, there is one of my favorite book from Miroslavov. It's called Exclusion and Embrace. And when you read the book, it talks about how do we embrace. It's a question of how do we deal with the other. And that's the problem that all of us, all communities, every human being, that's the problem that they're faced with. How do you deal with the other? And so, I could say that he talks about, 3 ways of dealing with the other. One of them is through a process, elimination, and genocide being the worst. But then when we talk of elimination is when you say, if you voted like this, unfriend me on Facebook. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is like, well, it's like you don't exist for me. Yeah. I'm going to, do all of that. That's one process. Now, the worst case, of course, is physical violence and whatever. But the second one is assimilation. The only way that I would deal with you is if you are exactly like me. Right? So, and the third one is engagement. Engagement means that I accept differences, I accept that you're different, but I learn how to engage with you, and sometimes even learning how to find common ground. Sure. And then seeing that, okay, for example, how can you vote for this? There's always, most people, honestly, they're more in the middle than they actually believe. Yes. Right? And then, so it's like, how can I find commonalities? And then also on top of that and that's where I love the process of debate, is that it forces you to think of, honestly, for no altruistic reason, just so you can win, is it forces you to think of how can a person justify this position. But
you have to put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, but that requires a sense of humility, right? It's a sense of like, I'm not it all. I don't know everything. I can also be wrong. And I think one of the other thing is that when you look at the other ways of elimination and assimilation, it is easy. Honestly, it's like, think of it, it's like that's the easiest thing to do, because I feel like maybe that's our default setting, right? But conflict is normal because we're imperfect beings with limited view and limited experiences from a social position who, if you're with another person, think of it as, even if you have a partner, conflict is normal. Sure. It is normal.
Yeah. And
right?
different personality types,
exactly.
Different backgrounds,
exactly.
Experiences.
And that's normal. But you can either view it as it enriches your life, or you can say, oh, the world would be better if you thought like me, right? But for me, I think one of the things that it is uncomfortable. Engagement is uncomfortable. It is vulnerable. It is vulnerable because it is getting in spaces being like, maybe I am wrong, and maybe I might not, my opinion is not as true as I think. But then also, it's never accepting to view the other person as not a human. Like you have to force yourself, and that requires sometimes that you're willing to go on the other side. And one of the things that I find honestly sad that I see in the U.S. A lot, and maybe that's because I'm a lot of Americans, you can just watch TV. There's enough of, is that the people that we celebrate are the people that tell off, or they're the people that, should sort of brush off the other side.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, do I think that a lot of people would say, oh my God, conservatives are this and this and this. And then I'm like, well, you haven't met many, but also it's like the ones that the televisions are going to are the ones that are
extreme.
Yeah, it's extremes.
They show
Exactly.
extreme examples.
Exactly. And sometimes for entertainment purposes, but they don't see that is killing the social fabric, because then they get one extreme versus another extreme for entertainment purposes, so you can all turn on TV. But the reality is, like, I would not like, in real life, we don't like people who are extremes, but it's just that we are fed that.
Yeah.
And then also we get to a point where it's, even with like people canceling, I'm like, come on, your view of the world is so limited. It's like this idea that this person said this thing 20 years ago, therefore I'm going to cancel them. I think there's a problem with that, to be honest. I think there's a problem with that. And I usually say that I get to say whatever I want and people disagree, and that's good. But I find that the beauty that the United States have is the ability of, I usually say, when I bring students, I tell them, welcome to the land of the First Amendment. So you can say whatever you want to say. But I find it sad that then everyone is walking on eggshells. It's like everyone is scared, because I'm like, no, guys, sometimes you have to have the right fears. And that fear for me is the fear of what will happen when we no longer engage one another. And now we are, violence is happening and we are justifying it. Well, never. I don't think we should ever get to a point where we justify what we will not justify for our own children for the other. And I think it takes work. And especially in the world that we're in now, it's work. You have to. If you are a Christian, learn about all the other things. This idea of demonizing anyone who does not believe what you believe. No, like, educate, learn, and talk. Yeah, exactly. Like, and your world would be so much bigger. Like, your world would be so much bigger. I mean, I think of it in a way that it's also refusing that to be put in certain boxes, right?
I'm not a fan of the box.
Right? It's like, no, it's this idea. Idea, for example. I mean, I'll tell you. Like, for me, I've seen it in this tribalistic tendencies, right? It's like, oh, you are part of us, and you cannot. So think of it. For me, I'm an African black man, right? So as part of, like, oh, you should not work with white people, or you cannot, or you should be scared of that. I was like, hell no, why? No. It's also refusing to go down that line. But it takes work, and say, no, I'm not an enemy. And then also refusing for people to be put into some sort of, oh, they're that. No, it is, it's this person, know them by names. Go, refusing for people to be, it's work, but it has to happen. And we need a lot more people who are courageous. I don't think people are as extremist. I don't think so. But I think most people are silent. Most people don't talk. Most people would rather be quiet than, hey, I don't want to create. Yeah. So they see, the problem of groupthink, right? It's like you see somebody part of your group and they do things, and it's like, I'm not sure if I agree with that, but you be quiet because you want to fit in. So.
Yeah, but I think you've given examples of what happens when you're quiet and when you don't speak up, and what can, the consequences of that. Yes. But it's easier sometimes just to say, I'm going to eliminate you. I'm not going to listen to you. I don't want to talk to you, than to actually sit down and do the work and say, like, look at us. I mean, on the outside, we look very different.
Exactly.
But we've had points of commonality throughout the conversation today. Like, if I, had more time with you, I'd say we're probably not that different in terms of our beliefs and, what.
Exactly. And it makes your life so much richer.
Yeah.
It makes your life so much richer.
Yeah.
I think it's the most beautiful thing is going to any place and knowing, oh, I have friends here.
Yeah.
And I can't explain how we're friends. We just have friends. It's your world is so much bigger. Your world is so much,
Well, it's a more pleasant way to live,
Exactly.
honestly. I mean, you can choose to be miserable and angry and, hate everyone. Or you can choose to get to know people and make an informed decision.
Yep.
And you're probably going to be a lot generally happier of a person if
Yeah,
you go that
honestly.
route.
And you are also, it's fascinating. You're curious. It's like, oh my God, I don't know how you think like that or do things like that. It's like, I would never do it, but that's amazing.
Yeah, but like there's always a story there. I feel like if you follow and start peeling it back, it's like, why I'm so passionate about this one thing or why I feel so strongly about this other thing. There's usually a really interesting story that backs up to why that is.
Yep. But that will require just sitting down and listening. And I think we're not very good at that. Yeah, no, true.
You're right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this is amazing. All right, anything that we haven't talked about that you want to get out there and say about leadership or just your life journey so far?
Leadership is hard. I think that's the one thing. Leadership is hard.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
It is hard. It is so vulnerable and it's so hard. But it is so worth it because then you get to do things that have not been done before. But it's hard. And I think acknowledging that is important. So when you are having a hard time, you don't think you're not a good leader. No. If everything is just a breeze, then you're not leading.
Yes.
It's hard. It's
very
hard.
True.
Yeah.
It is, but worth it.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
And you're such a brilliant example of the impact and influence that you can have on someone, not just someone, a whole. I'm amazing. Like, I just think about the ripple effect of all the lives that you've touched, and it's beyond what you could ever count or any of us could count. And it just continues on and on and on, which is so amazing.
It's like, what an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And keep doing it.
Thank you.
Making a difference. Don't give up now.
No.
And are you game to do a very quick lightning round with me?
Yes.
Okay.
I hear that's the hardest part. So let me.
I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, let me see.
60 seconds to answer as many open-ended questions. We make it competitive. There's no prize.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. What season best fits your personality?
Summer.
Okay. What's your most used emoji in text?
The laughter one.
Yeah. What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
Book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire. Movie, for some reason, I don't know why. P.S. I love you. And then, don't judge me. And then the podcast is Masters of Scale.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
That I'm an introvert.
I could see it.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on
books.
It's worth it. What celebrity would you want to play you in a movie? Because your life is definitely a movie.
Oh, what celebrity? Oh my, Denzel Washington.
Who's gonna say Denzel? All right. If you wrote a book, what would the title be?
Oh, well, I'm writing one.
I was gonna say, do you have a book?
No, writing one.
There goes my timer.
Oh man.
Keep going.
My mind just went, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it just went blank. I just forgot.
Okay.
Oh my God. My brain just froze.
We need to nominate a title for the book.
Yeah.
But that's exciting.
Yes.
I'm glad you are writing a book.
Yeah.
Okay. Then when you write it, you can come back on to the podcast and talk about it.
Deal.
Yes. Okay. Thank
Deal.
you again so much for being here. This is
awesome. No, thank you very much. I love the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, shine bright, everyone.